Hello, welcome to the Founders Code, where we break down how the world's most influential people built their fortunes. In today's episode, we look at the one they call robber baron, the richest man in history and the world's first billionaire, Mr. John Davison Rockefeller. In 1839, John D. Rockefeller was born in a poor household in New York. You know those viral videos that show you where some rich person was born? Yeah, it's usually a mansion or something fancy. Well, not this guy. He was born in a two-room shack owned by his parents who were dirt poor. That was until his dad, William, who had previously been a traveling salesman, became an ever-drunk criminal con man. And after beating his wife several times, he finally went too far and assaulted his own son, John. As punishment, William was kicked out of the house. According to legend, young John then turned to his mother and said, "Don't worry, Ma. I'm going to make enough money to support us all." Perhaps the first sign of the cunning and drive that would make him famous. In truth, though, his path to riches began when John D. Rockefeller was just 16 years old. In the late 1850s, there was an oil boom in Pennsylvania after large deposits of the resource were discovered there. At the time, crude oil was largely seen as useless, and so the region was flooded with the stuff, much like North Dakota in recent years. Now most young men would have tried to stake a claim and drill for oil themselves. But Rockefeller, who worked as a bookkeeper, saw another opportunity. While attending a lecture on the new industry, he realized there weren't any large-scale facilities to refine the crude oil. So while everyone else was scrambling to drill for oil, Rockefeller used his life savings and borrowed money to purchase the rights to refine the oil that was being pulled from the ground. This proved an inspired decision, as refining was far more profitable than drilling itself. Now operating under the name of Rockefeller and Erie, he quickly gained a reputation for selling high-quality kerosene, which could be used in lamps to light homes and businesses. But Rockefeller had bigger plans. He wanted to control the entire supply chain of oil products in the United States. So he set about doing exactly that. In 1870, Rockefeller founded what would become one of the largest corporations in American history, Standard Oil. His goal was simple: buy as much oil as possible, refine it, and sell it at a lower cost than anyone else in the country. With these goals in mind, Rockefeller set about expanding the company and quickly gained control over most of the refineries in Ohio. From here, he started buying up refineries around the country, but his real innovation was using rebates from railroads to ship his oil products. During this time, railroads would offer discounts for bulk shipments. However, they also offered special, almost secret discounts to certain companies if they agreed not to ship with any other company. By leveraging his massive profits, Rockefeller paid these rebates and starved his competitors of cheap transportation. Anyone that refused to play ball was simply crushed. Over the next few decades, he used every trick in the book to expand his empire. Undercut competitors, bought rival refineries, and bribed politicians to pass favorable laws. And so the number of independent refineries in the United States dropped from dozens to just 4. 3 of them would soon merge to form the competitor known as the Texas Oil Company, later renamed Exxon. The 4th, controlled by Rockefeller, would come to dominate the rest of the country. In fact, Rockefeller's empire eventually controlled 90% of all oil refining capacity in the United States. This made him the richest man in the world, worth nearly $1 billion by the turn of the century. To accomplish this, he'd use any means necessary: secret deals, intimidation, lies, and violence. At one point, he even hired Pinkerton agents to spy on members of his board of directors to see if they were secretly meeting with competitors, going so far as to plant bugs in the offices. To escape detection, he employed lobbyists to write favorable laws. For example, he spent tens of thousands of dollars lobbying for a law to prevent states from taxing the transportation of oil. At the time, this was worth about $500 million. That's why he earned the nickname Robber Baron. And not only did he get away with it, but many Americans actually liked it because Rockefeller wasn't stealing from society. He was stealing from other rich guys. Well, maybe that's not entirely true either. One of his most ruthless moves was when he attempted to destroy a refinery in St. Louis that was owned by his friend Henry Flagler. You heard that right. He tried to put his friend out of business to expand his own empire. And when Flagler tried to fight back, Rockefeller simply cut off the supply of oil. After 26 days, Falter was forced to sell his refinery at a loss, which immediately boosted Standard Oil stock prices. So if the guys at the top didn't like him, how did the general public feel about him? Well, they didn't really know. But that would soon change. See, Standard Oil was incredibly secretive. They didn't publish annual reports like other companies and held their annual meetings in private. In fact, no one outside of the company knew how much oil they were refining or how much money they were making. The best estimates put Standard Oil's profits at anywhere from 8 to 15%, which at the time was insanely high. However, no one outside of the company knew for sure. But the secrecy would eventually be lifted by the Muckrakers, a group of investigative journalists who were trying to expose corruption and inequality across the United States. The most famous of these was Ida Tarbell, who wrote a series of articles exposing the underhanded tactics of Rockefeller and Standard Oil. These articles led to a federal investigation and ultimately the indictment of Standard Oil executives on fraud and bribery charges. And in 1908, a South District Court judge ordered the breakup of the Standard Oil Company. In 1911, the Supreme Court ruled that Standard Oil was indeed violating antitrust laws. And the following year, it was split into 34 separate companies, including Exxon and Chevron. Each executive was given shares in the new companies and allowed to keep their ill-gotten gains. As a result, Rockefeller's personal wealth skyrocketed. He now owned shares in all 34 companies and was officially the world's first billionaire, although he never saw it coming. See, he'd already decided to retire from business in 1903. But this breakup changed everything. It turns out Rockefeller had been holding on to most of his shares in the parent company, not the individual refineries. As a result, he was personally worth about $500 million, or about $16 billion today, based on this ruling. So what did he do with all of his money? Well, he spent the last 30 years of his life giving away most of it. He donated millions to build schools, hospitals, and museums. In fact, he gave away about $500 million in today's terms before he died in 1937. In addition, he created the Rockefeller Foundation, which has awarded over 200,000 grants totaling more than $5 billion since its inception. In fact, he's still the largest donor to the foundation. Even today, he funded the construction of the University of Chicago and served as its first chairman of the Board of Trustees. He might be gone, but his legacy certainly isn't forgotten. In fact, there are mixed feelings about him even today. Some see him as a ruthless monopolist that used underhanded tactics to take advantage of the American people. Others see him as a pioneering philanthropist that helped establish many of the charities that we rely on today. So who was he? Well, that's up for you to decide. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. We regularly release new videos about the world's most influential people and the secrets of their success.